Hello, everyone, and welcome to this discussion by the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. I'm Valerie Hopkins. I'm a Moscow correspondent for the New York Times, and I'm very thrilled to be moderating this discussion because the question that I get asked most about my reporting in Russia is about what ordinary Russians really think. And today we have a fantastic opportunity to speak to two people who are still in Moscow and who are still working very hard all the time to answer this question. So, and it's both of them have been an extreme resource for my work, and I know for the work of many of my colleagues who are journalists covering Russia, both from inside Russia and outside. So it's my honor to introduce Andrei Kolesnikov, who's a senior fellow at the Carnegie Russia Eurasia Center, and Denis Volkov, the director of the Levada Center, who will be discussing their report, Alternate Reality: How Russian Society Learned to Stop Worrying About the War. I will be moderating a discussion for about 40 minutes, and then we will be taking questions from the audience. So please feel free to drop questions into the chat if you're watching this on YouTube or the platform formerly known as Twitter. Some of our other moderators will help by selecting the questions and feeding them to me. So don't forget to do that. I read your report with interest when it came out in November and refreshed my memory again. And it's been very, very, I think that I want to start actually with your conclusion, which I found to be incredibly powerful, in which you wrote that the processes by which society has absorbed ideas and events over the past 20 months of the protracted special military operation have tarnished people's morals and distorted their sense of reality. A year ago, this segment of society might have chosen to hide from reality. Today, it's living in an artificial world in which the Russian nation is carrying out a messianic mission and defending itself from the West that seeks to destroy it. I wonder if you could briefly talk about what are some of the major factors that have enabled people to stop hiding and actually start to embrace this mission, this historic mission that the president has told the nation that it's on. Maybe we can start with you, Andrei, if your internet is still working fine.
Yes. Thanks so much for this question, because it's very important to understand what has happened during the year 2023. It was a year of adaptation to reality, final adaptation. People understood that the war, this is something for a long time, which will be continued. And because of that, people decided to create kind of a psychological defense from this war, from these horrible events. They accepted the justifications, the explanations which are coming from the very top, from the president, from different officials, from television primarily, but not only from television. Kremlin is quite active in social media as well. So it's better to concentrate on your private life, not to mention that this is possible. If you are not involved directly into trenches, you can live your normal life, more or less normal, and you can keep this sense of normality in your everyday life. This is very important, and Kremlin understands it's quite good. And I think that at least until the end of this presidential campaign, Kremlin will choose this option, not to mobilize people, and not simply in military sense, but even in emotional sense. It's better to keep the sense of normalcy. The war, this is one track of your life. You must be patriotic, but we will not involve all of you into the process of war. What will be after the presidential elections, we don't know any kind of details. I think Kremlin doesn't know as well which option for the future political line. But for the moment, it's better to keep in action this very social contract normalcy in exchange for support of the leader.
Thank you. Denis?
Well, yes, the possibility to live the normal life is one condition of this stability of the assessments, of the approval ratings. Another one is economic stability, because well, we see that large resources were diverted to maintain this stability. First, to stabilize the situation when the sanctions were first introduced, to kill the panic that we saw, then to spend money and resources to increase pensions, increase salaries of state workers. And these are, well, big sums, and also money for those who participate in this special military operations, it is called in Russia. And you must understand that people from smaller areas, smaller towns that in big numbers participate in this, they now get 5-6 times more than in their normal situation, because well, the payments for them are pretty high, especially viewed from the small areas of Russia. And the result of it is that we see that for the first time in many years, the numbers of those who are saying that their life is turning to worse, they in decrease. We also saw that this layer of middle income Russians, it grew several percent just in 2 years. So people now are getting money that they can spend. Of course, there's inflation. Of course, it also contributes to this inflation. But for the first time in their lives, so well, sizable parts of population are, well, feeling better, I would say. So this is also the very important condition of these attitudes. And maybe I will add another one, that how the war itself is understood, of course, by the help of state media, of course, by the help of the Russian elites who will define these terms in the media. But it's from the very beginning, even before the war started, even before hostilities started, the conflict and escalation was seen as encouraged by the West, not by Russia, by the United States. All the blame is put on the United States. And in this sense, and in this scheme, well, Russia is waging a defensive and just war. So it also helps to get the consent of the people. So in this sense, Putin is seen as a defender of Russian people in Donbass, Russian people inside Russia. So yes, that's what's happening in public opinion.
Indeed, I highlighted this quote from also towards the end of your report, where you mention a female survey respondent who wrote that her life was actually better because her son was participating in the war and sending money back home. And that other people who had also said their life was, the country was heading in the right direction, also said that. And you said very clearly, it would be fair to say, therefore, that to a large extent, the consistency of public opinion in Russia 2022 to 23 was achieved through substantial government payouts to the public. And I guess I wanted to ask both, I mean, I don't want to discuss the economic ramifications of that, but I wonder if I know that a lot of your research is done about focus groups, and I was wondering how much and how actually opinion changes, if they do have a stronger encounter with a war, whether it's a son or relative dying, whether it's a resident of Shebekino or Belgorod, which is now, effectively kind of a, in some ways a frontline city, and whether, because we see that so many Russians don't feel personally affected, but there are with each passing month, more and more Russians are, and I wonder if you can say anything to that, and whether that changes how that affects maybe their opinion towards whether this war is right, or whether they support the president and his waging of the war.
I can add something to the last argument of Denis concerning economic situation. The dependence on state is very high in this economy, and it became bigger during the war because of the state interventions, but it undermines the state budget, which is a source of buying loyalty of the population. But for the moment, the Ministry of Finances is making different tricks in order to making budget deficit less. But they are creating, let's say, a new middle class. This is not a new process. But now, all these people from FSB, Army, National Guard, Procurator Office, etc., they are our new middle class, and they're ready to support this regime, to defend this regime, and in that sense, to defend themselves. Millions of people are working on state as siloviki, so to say, but there are millions of people who are working as budget-dependent people, teachers, doctors, not to mention public servants. So in that sense, they can create a big wave of support in a practical sense as well during the presidential elections. The problem of losses, for instance, can undermine this trust towards authorities, but nobody knows real figures of these losses. In small republics and small provinces, people know how many soldiers are killed or wounded, but this is for the moment we have this kind of convention. Yes, we were attacked. We are at war. We must defend our country. That's it, full stop. And this is the duty of good people to defend our country. This is the duty of our sons and husbands. But again, this is not so monolithic, because we see now some glimpses of discontent. I mean, this small movement of the families of the mobilized soldiers. They express it openly. Some discontent in ethnic republics, not on the ground of the war at the first sight, but really this is general discontent, and it is transmitted into the sections against authorities, big protests in Yakutia, in Bashkortostan. So it means that this very consolidation is quite fragile right now. But we don't know what kind of news, what kind of triggers can change the situation in the country, the perception of reality by the majority of Russians. Majority still matters. And majority still is a trendsetter in this society.
Speaking of frontline regions, frontline cities, well, we personally do not have this data, but some of the reliable figures were published, I think, in the autumn last year, and we see that the people there are more angry with Ukraine. So they are more supportive of Russian military, Russian government, because they feel they swore on themselves, and because they have some of them are dying, some of them are losing their homes. So we see that on the whole, people in frontline cities on the border are more hostile towards Ukraine. So at least for now, and also I think in our figures we saw that when the shelling of Russian cities and also drone attacks started in the spring last year. We also had the lowest level of support of peace talks. Though throughout the half of the year, this numbers grew from about 45% to about 55% or so. So it's for me it's one of the indicators of growing fatigue in the society. But I would not overestimate it that much, because still the people say that we are small people. We can't influence the situation that much. The government knows better, so let big guys in the government, let Putin decide what to do. They know better. So it's still the delegation of a responsibility of authorities to this upper level, but also the recognition that, well, people can't do anything about it, though they can worry, they can think that the war is bad, and really the majority would say this: the war is bad, people are dying, it's not good. But what can be done? This is how the majority react to this to the events.
I also hear the same refrain time and time again in my own reporting, for sure. But some would say that right now, this pre-election campaign, in which we see the possibility that a anti-war, pro-peace negotiations candidate may wind up on the ballot. We've seen people lining up for him in cities across Russia, and also Russians in the diaspora. What does your research? I know I hate to ask people to predict the future, but what lessons can we draw from your research about what kind of appeal a candidate like Boris Nadezhdin might have for ordinary Russians, and will he be able to appeal to more than just the kind of core 13% of the population that you've identified, who has not only opposed to the war, but names Russia as the aggressor in the war, and is okay with giving back occupied territories, etc. Sorry, I don't know who wants.
This is an interesting. Yeah, this is an interesting phenomenon and unexpected one, because nobody was waiting for the appearance of this kind of politician. And Nadezhdin was not so recognizable at the scale of the whole Russia, despite the fact that he participated in television talk shows, and he is a practical politician for many years. He's a person with liberal views, but now he became, in his first steps, kind of a substitution for Duntsova, who was kind of a candidate from people, let's say, a girl from nowhere. Then she was not registered as a candidate, and now Nadezhdin has been gathering signatures for his candidacy, and we're waiting for the result of it. But he is not kind of a real person with a surname, name, etc. He's a symbol of the possibility to express your personal discontent with the regime. Some people can hope for his participation if he will not benefit from this participation in the future. They hope for a demonstration to the regime, the figures of this discontent. It could be 10, it could be 20, it could be 1 or 2%. Now, nobody knows how it will work in the future. But emotionally, this is a glimpse of hope. Technically, this is the possibility to go to the streets in this line, in this queue. And this is an open demonstration of your liberal anti-war and anti-Putin views. Because this is a case of courage. You demonstrate your passport. You can't escape this procedure, so you openly express your vision of the world, anti-Putin vision. Because of that, this is quite serious. For Kremlin, maybe it is not so good to have this kind of candidate who can demonstrate big figures. On the other hand, they can hope that he will get, let's say, 2% as Sobchak in recent elections. And they can say, hey, you see, liberal views are not supported by people. Our president has got 80% and this guy only 2%. Less than a communist candidate or something like that. But the risk is quite high because, again, channeling this discontent, using this instrument as Nadezhdin, people can participate in these elections. Yes, they are legitimizing not so legitimate procedure, but at the same time, for somebody it doesn't matter. Because this is a glimpse of hope and a real tool to demonstrate your anti-war aspirations.
Well, at one point I can agree with Andrei is saying, but right now I do not see it as a big threat to Kremlin at all. He started, Nadezhdin started with about 1% 2 months ago. I'm not sure that he now can get much more. I don't believe in this 10% that some pollsters are publicizing right now. So I would say for now, he still seems a very convenient figure for Kremlin because it will boost figures of participation in these elections. And still, from my point of view, he is still a very safe figure for Kremlin. And you see that the war brought about the big consolidation of public opinion around Putin, around Russian state. It is almost the same consolidation that happened in 2014, 2015, when the first breakout of this conflict. So what we are now seeing, this nationalism, wave of nationalism, that if we look at the electoral numbers that Putin is getting in, for example, open-ended questions that we asked in November, in last year, in 2022, we see that these numbers doubled since the war started, from about 30% an open-ended question to about 60. We see the same in the indicators of trust. We see the same in the question whether or not you would like Putin to be re-elected to the next term. So these figures doubled. This type of consolidation makes elections pretty safe for the authorities, and I don't think that Nadezhdin will be able to threaten Kremlin that much. Oh, still there is 1 month and a half ahead, and we saw some examples. People like Prokhorov, people like Grudinin got about 10, 15 or so percent, less than 15. Navalny, for example, in Moscow, he also started with 1% at the beginning of campaign, and then got about 27% of votes in Moscow elections in 2013. But Nadezhdin still has to prove he is a politician of the same caliber as those people. I think he hasn't yet proved this, though the fact that he was able to get these signatures is already one step further, a big achievement, but still this is a very long way from this to a considerable number of votes, and I'm not sure he will be able to run it in only 1 month and a half. We shall see. We shall see.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I do find it fascinating that, that 13% of your respondents are willing to be very open in their criticism of the war, in accusing Russia of starting it, and that the polls for presidential elections, shall we call them, don't seem to reflect that. And I wonder, is that also because people may, I don't know, as much as they may disapprove of the war, fear what might happen in Russia if there was drastic changes to the leadership on top, even though I don't know that anyone sees that as a really realistic scenario?
Yeah, this is a good question, actually. Well, maybe it's worth of researching into it, but I would say that, well, we have between 20 and 25% of those who are against from the very beginning, against of the war. So there is not a few people in Russia, but I think they have to trust and believe that there is a real candidate who expressed their feelings, and well, to get the votes of these people, well, the politicians have to, well, put a lot of effort in his campaign to convince them.
Thank you. I thought that one of the other things that I thought was really fascinating in your paper was about the doubts that, reading through the lines of what some of your respondents have said, pointing to the doubts that respondents might have. So if they could go back in time, you found 48% of them would still support the special military operation, but actually 39% would not, which is really huge. It's a significant number that correlates to the 41% of Russians who believe that the special operation has done more harm than good. Although with the caveat that 38% believe that it's done more good than harm, it seems. So in other words, many people are backing the government initiatives while actively recognizing the harm they're doing. And I wonder if you could try to unpack this kind of holding two positions at the same time.
It's more or less typical to have contradictory views in one head, in one soul for respondents. On the one hand, we are living in a modernized society, urbanized, modernized, even in small cities, middle-sized cities, and here is a social, let's say, Soviet heritage. We do not want war, never again, etc., etc. And we are peaceful people. During all the focus groups, during small interviews with people in the streets, which sometimes Radio Liberty makes, or Steve Rosenberg from BBC that does this kind of small interviews, people say, we are for peace, we want peace, let's stop it. But on the other hand, there is always a caveat like, look, we were not initiators of this war. We were attacked. We didn't begin it. This is all because of the position of the United States, NATO, the West as such, European Union. Ukraine is only a tool. They're our brothers, but they are used by the authorities of this very West. And this is a result of all long-time justifications of all these processes. And at the end of the day, this is not a contradiction. People are trying to explain to themselves why we are at this very point, why we can't influence this situation, we can't stop it. At the end of the day, our guys, our boys are there. We can't be against them, and this is the logic of the authorities. One more point is we can't measure, we can make a calculus how strong is fear among average Russians. Not all of them do think that they are in a concentration camp. The majority still thinks that we are living in a more or less democratic state. We have an opportunity not to be frightened by our authorities. This is all about other persons, foreign agents, bad people, people who are trying to undermine our consolidation. So we can say that fear is the main factor in this cautious behavior. But generally, I think people understand that they must be more cautious than 2 years ago in their wording, in their contacts, in their speech, etc., etc. So, in that sense, this factor also works.
Just sorry to add on top of that, in my I am a lot less scientific in my vox pops and discussions than you are with your focus groups, and I often find that people try to indicate at least that they are not really aware of the extent of the rising number of political prisoners, the small thing that the small ways that you might post on social media and share your opposition to the war, and these are people who say, I don't watch anything, I don't read anything, I'm in my own world. And I just wonder how common that is among your respondents. Obviously, probably many of them are not reading every post on Ovidinfo or Pavelchikov's Telegram channel, but are they very aware of what could happen to them? Because you're saying these decisions are not really driven by fear, and I wonder how many people genuinely follow that and are aware of how serious it is in Russia now.
Well, like in every country, the majority of Russians do not follow news closely. I think only about quarter or less, about maybe 20% of Russians, they are interested in politics. They try to follow the news, but the majority don't, and so they do not have consistent views of political events, political news. And they rely heavily on what is on the mainstream media. Mainstream media in Russia and in other countries, they more or less form the public opinion on political issues that are not related directly to the person. And we actually see that many people who know, they usually know something or heard something about new laws and so on and so forth. And the majority tend to support them because they say it's not for them. They are good citizens. Why should they fear of these repressive laws? And they don't see it as repressive, but a good measures to protect the state, protect the everyday life of ordinary citizens. So the majority don't go into it. And we see the reality is that with, of course, Russia has this dominant state dominant mainstream media, but YouTube is free. You can watch watch everything you like, but the majority still tend to rely on state-run television or even state-supported bloggers who are now very active online, on YouTube, on Vkontakte, which is the most popular social network in Russia. And the state is pouring a lot of money to attract these popular bloggers in state-supported or state-influenced social networks. So they are doing this job and forming the controlling the narrative, and by this controlling a big chunk of public opinion on what's going on.
Thank you. I want to come back actually to the elections and ask about, many Russians that I know see the elections as kind of a mental barrier, right? People who are in exile are thinking, well, maybe I can go back before the elections because maybe nothing will happen then, or I can stay until, just before the elections, and then I have to leave because maybe there will be another mobilization. And I wonder if in your current surveys, you are noticing the same thing, that there is a sense of, I think you both mentioned that even Putin himself probably doesn't know what he's going to do after the elections. But I wonder if you've noticed this kind of mental barrier, and this, even as so many people have told you that their lives are getting better, another group of people feel that they are unable to plan for that. And I guess I'll just add on to that a question that's already arrived from the audience, which is asking how potential future rounds of mobilization might affect Russians. Would it encourage more of them to oppose the war, or maybe strengthen support? And this, unfortunately, I don't know who asked the question, but they asked also if support might naturally decline over time. So now I'm sorry for giving you 3 different questions. I don't know who wants to take it, maybe Andrei.
What about mental barrier? I think the elections are simply an event, which is, despite the fact that this is not election in the proper sense of the word, it is very important for every Russian citizens, both abroad and inside the country. But this is a period of waiting for something. Generally, we're living in a situation when we are waiting for the end of something, for the end of this war, for the end of a period of repressions, for the end of Putin's regime. But this event is really important from this point of view. And for sure, for many people, the main question is whether after the elections, this regime could be more cruel, more repressive, whether it could initiate a new wave of mobilization. And we can't exclude anything, because we have an experience of presidential election of 2018, when Putin and his team, they read this people's mandate as a mandate for doing something, and they initiated this pension reform, which was quite unpopular, and Putin's ratings were stagnating for a long time. Now, maybe they are a bit frightened by this experience, and it is not so sensible to begin a new wave of mobilization, because it can provoke a high level of anxiety, as it was during this recent partial mobilization. It is not so good, because you never know how people could behave after this kind of military draft, because it could violate this very fragile social contract between the population and the authorities. This is one dimension of the story. Another dimension is that people are eating and accepting everything which they're getting from the top, from Kremlin. Why not to try again to initiate this new wave of military and emotional mobilization around the leader? And maybe people will accept it. Maybe we will have small protests, not more, and we can cope with these problems. I'm trying to be in the shoes of Kremlin manipulators, but this logic is also possible. But again, generally speaking, it's better to keep this social contract for a long time, because we're witnessing the war of attrition. This is for a long time, and people must have time to adapt to new circumstances, and the situation must be quiet for them, more or less quiet. This is a normal logic. I don't know how Kremlin can assess the situation after the election, how they will decipher the new mandate from people with Putin's 18% or 79% or something like that.
Denis, do you have anything to add, or shall I ask you a different question?
Yeah, maybe we can go on.
Yeah, I guess one thing that's been very interesting for me, kind of being based between EU and Russia is a lot of the rhetoric that we see about Russians now in the West. And I often, whether it's a discussion of good Russians and bad Russians, or it's, the endless discussions on morning talk shows about the fact that, EU countries have the right to not only take Russian property like cars or toothpaste, cell phones, all this stuff. And, both of you have spoken about the degree to which so many Russians are convinced about the fact that the West provoked this war, and so maybe it's really maybe this question is really moot. But I'm just interested if you see that Western leaders missed some opportunities in how they were in communicating directly to Russians, or if you see that all of these discussions over the past almost 2 years have also contributed to the resentment of Russians and the feeling that the West really wants to see Russia fail.
Well, there is always talks and, as I understand, the wish of the Western elites and Western politicians to address directly the Russian society. And I would say they were not able to do this. And from the very beginning, everything connected with the West, if you look at the majority of the public, was labeled as the voice from the enemy, a voice from the other side, the Western propaganda, and so on, and so forth. And what else would you expect if there is this conflict and there is two sides, and Ukraine in the middle? At least how it is broadly understood here. So yeah, and I would say that the situation also is that the foreign sources such as BBC, such as some others, Russian media working from outside, they are not very popular. Only several percent. They reach several percent of the public, and it means that they could not influence the broader layers of society. And also, I would say that I'm maybe not in position to judge, and Western leaders have their own minds and all their own goals. But if you speak about Russian society, I think there was a wrong decision to cut Russia completely from the West, because it's the Western-minded people who suffer from this decision, because we see that the most westernized groups and who think of themselves as Europeans, as Westerners, share the same values with the West, they are much more critical of the whole situation, and at the same time they feel themselves catch between the crossfire. There is the Russian government, who is pressing from one side, but also the West, who is not who is blocking them. And especially, I think this is the problem for young Russian from the biggest cities, who identify themselves with the West on many things, not on everything, but on many things. And now they can't go. Now they feel sometimes even betrayed by the West. And also in the long run, it will contribute in a big alienation, not between the countries, but between societies, which I think in the long run is not a very fruitful thing. But again, Western society, Western leaders have their own agendas, own understanding of what's going on, and I can't say whether it was a mistake on their side or not, but this is the situation on the ground.
Thank you so much. Andrei, I wonder if you could talk about this specific group of respondents who were opposed to starting the war, who were opposed to, to the fact that the war began, but now believe fervently that Russia must win it. And I guess I'll add to that a question from the audience, a sub-question, which is just a small one. How do you think Russian society will respond if Russia ends up losing in Ukraine and has to halt the special military operation? Do you think that in the long run, I mean, this is, of course, very forward-looking and many things can happen, but the question is, do you think that in the long run the war will be viewed as a mistake, or will it become a new source of resentment against Ukraine and the West? So please take out your crystal ball. Uh-oh, perhaps you're in his internet stuff.
Here is a small misunderstanding how Russians are considering the very notion of victory or failure in this war or defeat. We can't lose. This is the general understanding of the situation. We could be only victorious. Partly this is because of this desire to finish the story, to have peace talks and a peace in the end of the day. If Putin will keep territories like Zaporozhye, Kherson, LNR, DNR, so it will be enough for the majority of the population. Sometimes we see that people being for peace, they are making such a condition. Let's keep these occupied territories, because we were suffering for 2 years, and our boys were dying, and because of that we must have something like compensation, territorial compensation. This is also works, and this is a general understanding that Ukraine can be in NATO at all. It's unacceptable even for the majority of the supporters of peace. Putin can find words to explain that any failure, any defeat is a victory. So he can do it today. He can do it tomorrow. So we can stop it. But he's saying all the time about that. We are for peace. Ukrainians do not want to begin the negotiations about peace. Because they're not ready to discuss these territories which are ours. So this is an impasse for both sides. But again, Moscow will not be occupied. Putin is ready to continue because he has this, let's name it, strategic patience. He is absolutely sure, we see it, that he has resources, he has time to continue. This is a problem for the West. And we must be sober, and we must understand it. So in that sense, people will not feel like we do not want Putin because he was not so successful. No, it will not be so. Putin will be successful in any possible scenario, in any possible option. And some people want peace through the military victory. Some people want peace through negotiations, or they want peace today and tomorrow, here and now. It depends on their personal view. But again, we could be only victorious in that sense.
Thank you so much. Well, and maybe in a similar vein, Denis, there's a question from the audience also. I don't know if you asked this particular question, but do Russian people see any parallels between the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and the current war in Ukraine? I wonder if that comes up in your focus groups.
No, we didn't ask it particularly. But I would say that when the war in Syria began, there was some parallels with Afghanistan, with some fears about it, but not with this one. And I think the because there is this difference about that we were talking already, that the war was forced on Russia by the United States as the majority seat, and we have no choice but to take up this challenge. So it may be bad, it may be a mistake, and may bring a lot of bad things with it, but the majority say that we had no choice but to answer this challenge. So I think this is the difference that don't help to compare it with the Afghanistan war, which was, I would say, more of a choice probably, but yeah, didn't hear many any at all, I would say, in focus groups, references to Afghan war with current situation.
Wow. Thank you for that's really quite insightful. And I would ask, I don't know if there was any chance for a kind of sneak preview of your ongoing research, because this was published, this was August 2022 until November of last year. But I would wonder if you notice any changes now in how people feel, given that in the autumn, there were a number of people who had been recruited by Wagner in prisons and then released from their service after having served 6 months. Those who survived, released from prison and returning to their home communities or elsewhere and committing pretty grave crimes. And I wonder if that's come up also in your focus groups, or if people comment on it, if people worry about it, if it changed their relationship to state decision making and feeling that their government is protecting the people.
Well, we actually asked a question about it, but some time ago already. And then the bigger part of population was in favor of this decision to recruiting these people. Again, the rationale was behind this is let someone do this dirty job, but not us. I would say that there is some anxiety about these people returning home, though I would say these are still single examples, and probably the authorities already try to deal with it by, as they announced that they will not allow these people to quit after a short period as previously. So yeah, the government understands it as a problem and addresses it. And I think it's just to prevent it to be a bigger story, but not this isolated examples, which we already see. Already seeing.
Thank you. Andrei, we have another question from the audience about Russian public opinion regarding Russia's role in several countries in Africa. I mean, is this something that Russians are interested in and care about? Is there, there was another question just saying Wagner. Is there Soviet nostalgia involved in this role? And Wagner ? So I don't know exactly what the questioner is getting to about Wagner, but I wonder if this is something people are interested in, proud of, think it should be downsized given the war, etc.
I don't think that Africa is in the focus of the public attention at all. Putin is trying to stress that we can be kind of a torch for these countries, just like Soviet Union was. And this is a part of this demonstration that we are following the steps of the Soviet Union in that sense. We are so mighty that we participated in some processes in Syria in 2015. Then we tried to return our lands, initiating this special military operation. This is the thinking of the 20th century, when big empires, they had zones of interest, zones of influence. and some countries in Africa, some countries in the Middle East, they were kind of satellites of the Soviet Union. And Putin wants to be this kind of person who can behave like a general secretary of the Communist Party, trying to compete with the United States in this big battle for influence in different parts of the world. But there is China, which is a new player in this big game, but primarily Putin for sure is competing with the West. In that sense, in a mythological sense, in the sense of this Soviet-like mythology, Africa matters. But this is only in general terms. This is not something practical. It's far away from everyday life of Russian citizens. Not to mention that Kherson and Zaporozhye, this is also somewhere far away, but okay, we are involved in this process, so we have to support this territorial expansion. But this is not about Africa. It's too far away from, again, everyday life. But generally, it's good. Yes, we are mighty because of that.
So, what have you seen about people's willingness to accept or make sacrifices, say, not receive a pay raise or struggle with heating if it means, in their minds, humanitarian help for people in occupied Zaporizhia or Kherson region? I mean, do you see people willing to give up something personally for what they believe is maybe an altruistic good, or is it really more apathy and indifference? I mean, are they ready? If they are not ready to feel empathy for Ukrainians who are being bombed, are they willing to kind of sacrifice some of their personal comfort for people they see as new citizens of Russia?
Well, I would say that the majority don't want to sacrifice much, and the majority would like to avoid any involvement in the conflict, though there is some participation still ongoing. For example, the number of people who donated something, some resources, some goods for those in the front line increased up to 40% in 2 years. So it is not much what these people are giving away, but still it's some participation. But the majority would like to avoid bigger participation, and the government, I think, understands it and let people live their lives, and this helps to maintain social stability and helps to wage the war further.
Thank you. We have just 2 more minutes left, and I guess I wanted to ask you looking ahead to this year. What are there some questions or themes that you want to be adding to your focus groups? Some new areas of interest for you, or new areas that you hope to explore that have opened up as a result of your focus groups over the past 2 years? And are you expecting any big changes perhaps to public opinion during this year, which everyone expects kind of to be more stable?
I can only be a consigliere to Denis because he's the main organizer of these focus groups. I think it's interesting to see how great is demand for changes, or it disappeared totally, just like right now, and how great is this war fatigue. Will it be developed and turned into something more serious? I think these 2 points could be quite interesting this year.
Yeah, but apart from this, I would say we already 1 year ago, our forecast was that the moods are stable, and we didn't expect much change in the moods. And the year passed, and I would say we are pretty in the same position. The moods are pretty stable, though there are some changes, but they're not big. And still there is a big, we see a big resilience to any, to any external effects that the Russia and its population is experiencing. So my forecast will be more or less the same, at least for 1 year.
Well, we'll check back in a year's time, and I'm sure a lot of things will have happened, but we'll see whether the public opinion stays the same. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to the panelists, to the Carnegie Russia Eurasia Center, and to all of you who have tuned in. If you haven't read this report yet, I strongly advise you to do so, and have a nice rest of the day. Thank you.